Wahoo! Another Wednesday, another podcast. You guys know the deal. You guys know how I line everything up, how I have to be go mode. Like I have to be doing something. And, sometimes it's a blessing, sometimes it's a curse. But yeah, we got another DFS episode for you guys coming right up, ready to rock and roll. But yeah, I had to bring a guest in here with me in order to talk about this actual episode, right? We had to go through and we actually had to bring in somebody that knew some prop bets because we have a brand new sponsor, which we're going to go into a second. But real quick, Johnny, go ahead, introduce yourself, let everybody know where you're from, what you do, how you're qualified to, talk about prop bets.
Chase, thanks for having me on, brother. Appreciate it. So every Tuesday with our good buddies, and, you've been on the show as well. We have Fantasy Egos with myself, Fitz, Tyrell, as well as I host a segment called The Weekly Taste every Sunday, highlighting the best NFL bets of the week. And of course, just the qualifications, man. I've been around fantasy football, the NFL, and just following up particular players for at least 15 years. So it's nice to watch the trends every week. And I feel like, if I can help some people put out some winners and put out their best lineups, then I'm doing a good job.
Yeah, that's a big asset to it. Making sure that you actually have the correct lineups for these prop bets are huge, because if you end up playing the wrong correlation with prop bets, it could end up screwing up your entire lineup for the most part. So with that being said, let's go ahead and dive into this matchup. And right before we actually do dive into this matchup, right, I do want to bring up our brand new sponsor, Thrive, right? Come hashtag prop up on Thrive Fantasy this season. Thrive is a fantasy sport app for player props, which is why I actually brought in Johnny. They've eliminated the need to do countless hours of research, because they only ask you about the top tier athletes in each matchup. You don't have to worry about those back end guys who just got activated, off the practice squad and you have to deal with on the front end of things. So they pretty much get rid of all that headache, and they make it easy for you guys. With the NFL matchups, you actually just pick 10 out of the 20 player props in order to build a lineup the same way you would with DFS. You line it up, you try and get the most amount right out of those 20 player props. So if you guys go check out Thrive Fantasy, right? ThriveFantasy.com, and you guys use Circle when you sign up, right? You'll actually receive an instant match bonus of up to $50, but you have to deposit $20 or more. So any spot between the $20 and the $50, you'll actually get that doubled up on Thrive Fantasy. Once again, that's ThriveFantasy.com. Use promo code CIRCLE. Oh, yeah. I kind of messed that one up at first, but I think I got it. I think I kind of edged in that one, right? It started out a little rough. What do you think, Johnny?
Nah, it was great, man. And I'm glad that you sent it that way, because I just signed up for Thrive, and I love the 2-for-1 that I'm getting. So I was looking at the prop bets, and they have some really great numbers, and definitely got some stuff ready for Thursday night, so I'm excited.
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun. It should be a blast. Actually, I'm excited for this matchup, because it's going to be a little bit frustrating to some extent, but also we can see clear routes as to where certain players definitely have some fantasy value. And, with every DFS episode that I do for the individual matchups, for the Monday nights and the Thursday nights, there's not always that clear path. Sometimes it can be really murky. We had the San Francisco game where we didn't know where each wide receiver is going to line up last week, because pretty much every wide receiver was hurt. With this one, it's a little bit more, I guess, predictable to an extent, but it still has a couple twists to it, which makes this matchup interesting. But before I actually dive into the individual matchups, I just want to tell you guys, there's 3 quarterbacks in fantasy that really fuck with me. They annoy the living hell out of me, and I can't stand it. And it's not because of their lack of personal production or anything like that, but it's actually more so the fact that their deficiencies end up hurting or harming the other players on their teams when it comes to the skill position players. The number 3 guy for me is going to be Baker Mayfield. And I was kind of, in between with him and Lamar Jackson, but I think I'm going to go Baker Mayfield as the guy that annoys me the third most. I know his system doesn't really ask him to throw as often, but when he does make his reads, it's just something that it's like a snail moving through his progressions. The second guy is going to be Nick Foles, right? And Foles actually would be number 1, but Allen Robinson, that is, still retains relevance when he's on the field. So I couldn't hate completely on Foles, because he can still get Allen Robinson the rock. Meanwhile, the ways that he misses Mooney, I swear to God, man, it bugs the living hell out of me. I don't understand it. But number 1 overall for me is Phillip Rivers. Phillip Rivers and his inability to complete passes to his wide receivers on a regular basis consistently, oh man, it drives me absolutely insane. And then you sit there and you look at the weeks where he actually does well and goes off, and you're like, man, like you can never actually see this coming. But it's getting to the point now where he's always had like this shot put type, throw, and it's getting now to the point where it's a slower wind up shot put type throw as to where the defenses can see it coming, and it's not very accurate overall. Now, I will say that Rivers does have 10 touchdowns on the season so far this year. 8 of those have been to the running back and the tight end. The other 2 to the wide receiver position with Zach Pascal. So looking into that, and trying to figure out where I want to go, I started with T.Y. Hilton. And I'm not saying that T.Y. Hilton is like a top option or anything along those lines, but Hilton has had the potential to actually go off and have big weeks. Like he's been running routes on almost every single passing play. They just haven't connected on like a regular basis. Honestly, I thought going into the season that he was going to be like a wide receiver 3 area, anywhere from 25 to wide receiver 32. But he's all the way down this year at wide receiver 90 with 6.7 points per game and no touchdowns this season. How are you feeling about T.Y. Hilton so far this year? Let's go ahead and take a break from me talking. How are you feeling about T.Y. Hilton this year?
You know what, man? Honestly, I'm very befuddled by this because I've mentioned this extensively on Egos all summer, and we touched on it last night, actually. T.Y. Hilton, I thought, coming into the season, him and Rivers, I thought were going to be the most valuable QB wide receiver stack. Rivers, like we just talked about, hit or miss. I think a lot of it has to do with a new system. He doesn't have as many weapons on the outside. But the biggest thing is, I was expecting T.Y. Hilton to take a step forward, have a nice bounce back year, a high wide receiver 2 type of year, and fill in a sort of Keenan Allen type of role, yards after the catch, an explosive playmaker. This season, and I said this last night, something isn't right with him. I don't know if it's health. Maybe him and Rivers just can't get on the same page. They just don't have the chemistry yet. Something isn't right because I don't think Hilton would have fallen off this far this quickly because he's still a talented playmaker. It's strange, to say the least. And honestly, he's a guy that you're probably not even starting every week anymore. He's a guy you would have at worst as a wide receiver 3. A lot of people as a wide receiver 2. So I don't really understand where it's coming from. I would still keep him around on your roster because at any given time he could show up. But it's certainly something to keep an eye out. And I don't think you can play him right now just the way it's going.
Yeah, I mean, his utilization is curious, which makes me a little bit cautious to play him in this game, moving forward. Obviously with us, focus on the DFS aspect. But let me go ahead and break down the Titans real quick in that secondary. The Titans secondary was absolutely brutal, right, moving forward. And that was somewhere where with the Indianapolis Colts, I felt like they could attack to an extent. But then I took a little bit deeper dive. I knew that they cut Jonathan Joseph. They also cut, a guy in the front 7. And then they promoted Breon Borders over there to become their outside, I believe, right corner. And then they traded for Desmond King for the Chargers to be over there playing in the slot. And honestly, King has been one of the best slot corners so far this year. He's been lights out. So it's not something as to where, like, I guess I just don't understand why the Chargers would get rid of him. And I don't know how they got him so cheap for a 6th overall pick, or I'm sorry, a 6th round pick. Meanwhile, when we look at Breon Borders, like he actually had a good game last week, but I'm going to discount that for now because it was up against the Bears. So looking at that side of things, looking at the secondary where I want to attack in this DFS matchup, the Colts actually have like 4 healthy receivers. We just talked about how T.Y. Hilton, is healthy and how his utilization hasn't been right. But honestly, it's kind of like a clusterfuck of production that we're going to see moving forward in this game. With Pascal, you're sitting there and you're looking at his pricing on on DraftKings. You would need 12.8 points for him to actually hit his implied value. He's done that one time so far this year, but that was up against the Bengals. So it's not something to where like that's going to be like, oh my God, he got 15 points against the Bengals. I need to play that dude, right? Because that's where you attack the Bengals is up against the slot. I mean, you attack him anywhere in the secondary, really, but he only beat his implied, or he only beat that 12.8 points, which is the applied value for this week, by only 3 points. So even if he put up that 15, 16 points, you're not getting a ton of return on value. And we already brought up Desmond King, right? Who's been a monster in the slot, which is where Pascal's lining up. So when I sit there and I look at Desmond King's stats, he's allowed 0 touchdown catches so far in the season, and 27 yards was the most amount of yards he's ever allowed in a single game. Even with Doyle being out this week with a concussion, I think Pascal's going to be a scratch for me in most of my lineups. I'm are you sitting there? Do you see a prop bet over there with Thrive Fantasy where you would actually, play Pascal over or under? Is there an option over there for Pascal?
There is an option. You know what? I was looking at it today, and here's the thing about Zach Pascal. We spoke about it earlier. I am not sold on pretty much any of the Colts. Their offense is just too much in flux. It's too hit or miss. There's a lot going on right now. And they started 5-2. They started 5-2 last year and just had a complete meltdown. So we don't know if we're going to be seeing the same thing. The biggest thing is, I honestly, and I might be in the red here with everybody else. I hate Thursday night games. They're so weird. Anybody could show up at any given time. It's just a very strange thing. But going to Zach Pascal, it's noteworthy. So ever since week 4, he's had at least 6 targets in every game except for week 5 against Cleveland. So he's done pretty well. He's got 44 yards or more in every game since week 4, except for that week 5. That was a weird one against the Browns where he didn't really get much burn with it. So he's actually doing consistently well. His number right now on Thrive, they have him at 40.5. I'm tentatively leaning towards going with the over because despite the fact that they got Desmond King and he's a good corner, just because he's a good corner doesn't mean he's going to slot right into the Titans defense. The Titans defense is a mess. They cannot get off the field. Who knows what's going on with Jadeveon Clowney? Their defense is, for whatever reason, being a major underachiever. So Pascal's actually a guy I would look at starting with the over on the yards. 40.5 is very attainable. Rivers could hit him on a nice 25-yard pass, and then it would be left to get 16 more yards. I think Pascal's a guy worth looking at as a DFS guy to get his over from Thrive's number at 40.5.
I can understand exactly where you're coming from, but I'm just a little bit more hesitant just because of the fact that you said since week 4, right? That's when he's gotten the 6 or more targets.
Except for that game against Cleveland where he only got 2. But that was an odd game.
Yeah, so for me, like when I'm sitting there and I'm looking at like these Thursday night games, yeah, they are a pain in the ass. But back to your point. In every one of those matchups so far, they've actually been missing either T.Y. Hilton for at least half the game, or they've been missing Michael Pittman. So like I said, with 4 actually healthy receivers on the field tonight, it's something as to where it kind of makes me a little bit nervous playing him, but I can understand exactly where you're coming from as to where, hey, he's had the production. Why not trust the already, the fact that it's already been there? And that brings it to another guy, right, who it hasn't been there for, and we brought it up slightly earlier. That's T.Y. Hilton. I mean, T.Y. Hilton just it hasn't been there for him. So why would you trust it for him to all of a sudden pop up? Honestly, Marcus Johnson has absolutely stepped up, and I want to believe in Hilton because Hilton, like you talked about, like he should be there, like he should be producing at a higher level. But it's just something where like they could mix it up, they could cannibalize targets. There's just too many variables for T.Y. Hilton to make me want to play him in DFS, especially at his price. T.Y. Hilton, by the way, has 135 snaps on the right and 139 on the left. Pittman has the same sort of thing. So when I'm sitting there and I'm trying to figure out who I think that he's going to match up against, it's going to be very unpredictable as a whole. Both Breon Borders and Malcolm Butler are both undersized guys, but Butler plays more of like a big man type, defensive role. And he's had a couple issues so far up against speed guys. He also had issues last year as well. So it's something as to where, like, I don't know. I think that they're going to put Pittman up against Breon and leave Butler up against Hilton. So there's always that upside type thing, but it's just too expensive for me. I think I have to back out of the whole T.Y. Hilton. Do you like T.Y. Hilton's over-under on the prop bets?
I wouldn't touch that because, like I said, Thursday night games, it's only 34.5. That's laughable. That's honestly laughable, the fact that it's that low, and we should be trying to smash this over. But the simple thing is, Hilton's not been healthy this year. He's just been very, very shady, even when he's on the field. 34.5 should seem like a smash, but I can't in good conscience even put anything remote on T.Y. Hilton because you never know. This might be the game where he breaks out because, like you said, now that it looks like they might have a full complement of healthy receivers. Speaking of, I wanted to ask you, has there been any news if Adoree Jackson's going to suit up?
I haven't seen anything on that yet. Go Go ahead and look that up, and I'll check it out because I might have missed on that. And if I did, that was a big whiff because that means that Breon Borders will not be on him. So anyways, let's go ahead and hop on to this next guy that I wanted to bring up. And that's going to be –
He's out. He's out.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
Cool. So, when we sit there and we look at the explosive plays allowed on the season so far, the Titans have actually given up the 7th least amount of explosive plays so far in the season. So they pretty much have all their deep, tight pressures covered. If you're sitting there, right, and you want to see an ROI in this game from the Colts receiving side of things, you're going to need 2 of 3 things. You're going to need either 80 yards receiving, you're going to need 8 receptions, or you're going to need a touchdown. And that's for DFS. That's not for prop bets. So when you sit there and you look at the ROI, right, I just don't know if Marcus Johnson and Hilton have that. Meanwhile, Pittman actually does. Pittman's the only receiver that I actually feel great about playing, and he's only 4,400 in DFS this week. A touchdown, 1 reception, and 14 yards covers your break even for Michael Pittman. Everything after that's all bonus. Michael Pittman could absolutely attain that. He had 56 yards last week on 4 or 5 receptions on, I believe, 7 targets. So it's something as to where Pittman could absolutely have just an extra touchdown with Doyle being out, with Mo Alley Cox, being on a limited snap count. I mean, we're talking about some big time points for Michael Pittman as a potential upside this week. So all 4 receivers for me, when it comes to Pascal, Marcus Johnson, T.Y. Hilton, and Pittman, they're all kind of not dart throws necessarily, but they definitely are kind of spotty in terms of boom bust potential. Pittman has the biggest upside with also the highest floor. So I love Pittman this week, not only in tournaments, but also in cash games as well. How do you feel about Pittman?
Looking at Pittman, I mean, obviously he had a nice week last week against the Ravens. The Ravens got a very tough defense. Marcus Peters was the only guy there. Marlon Humphrey was out because of COVID. He had nice 7 targets, 4 catches, 56 yards, very nice. But the week before that against the Lions, in a game where they scored 41 points, he only had 1 target. He missed all the games up until week 3 against the Jets, 4 targets. Week 2 against Minnesota, 6 targets. Week 1 against Jacksonville, 2 targets. I get it. He's a rookie. He's new. But, I mean, honestly, for all the problems that the Colts have had on offense, especially trying to find a reliable wide receiving pass catcher, Pittman really hasn't gotten the volume. And I get it. He's missed a few weeks, but I would think that they'd be trying to get him at least 5 or 6 looks a game. Phillip Rivers, it's not like – so some of these games he's been throwing the ball 40 times, 35, 40 times, and he's just not getting the amount of volume. So for me, the big play potential is there, but I just don't know if I trust the volume enough. And honestly, volume is king in fantasy. Efficiency we can't always rely on. So I'd probably fade him this week just because I don't know the amount of volume he's going to be getting.
Yeah, but like I said, all you need is a touchdown, 1 reception, and 14 yards in order to pay off for DFS. So you don't need volume. You just need one play. And that's what he offers you with upside for future plays. But with the prop bets, he's sitting at what, 35 yards, 33.5 maybe, I think, for Thrive?
30 and a half.
Yeah, dude, I would take that all day, as an over.
It's worth a shot. No, it's absolutely worth a shot if we're talking about prop bets. But a lot of these prop bets it's worth a shot. That's like the slogan of the week because these guys you can't really count on. They're not, the sample size isn't there, the consistency is not there. It's like, all right, you know what? Like let me take a shot on it. But like I said, the Colts for me, like the only receiver I'm really looking at that I'd be like, all right, you know what? I feel the most confident I'm putting the over on his number is Zach Pascal, just because he's been doing it for the last 5 games to where the consistency, the volume, the floor, it's at a level where I feel comfortable.
Okay. I could see that. I mean, like I said, I'm more into Pittman, but I can understand 100%, Pascal's had the volume, previously, and obviously Phillip Rivers likes him. Now let's go into a guy that, maybe we both can agree on. We'll see if this happens with the tight end position, because I absolutely love Burton. I think Burton is a smash play this week. We talked about earlier in the episode, the tight ends have seen 5 of Rivers' 10 touchdowns so far on the year. And Phillip Rivers has had 8 touchdowns inside the red zone. 5 of those 8 have actually been to the tight end. Meanwhile, Burton has 6 red zone opportunities in the past 4 games. He's going to be in a ton of my lineups, man. He's going to be a ton of my lineups. We already talked about how Doyle is most likely going to be out with a concussion. Mo Alley Cox could be on a limited snap count. I'm telling you, man, like 15 of the 22 touchdowns so far in the red zone have been passing touchdowns. So, and that's up against the Titans so far this year. So, yeah, I'm sitting there and I absolutely love Trey Burton this week. How are you feeling about Trey Burton?
Yeah, you know what? I agree with you there. I think the Titans are giving up the 11th most points to fantasy tight ends this season, especially if Jack Doyle's out. Mo Ali Cox, he's been a little bit banged up, and we've been talking about it the entire show. The Colts pass catchers are all there. There's not one guy that we're looking at. Burton's had some real good games. I mean, he hasn't done much the last couple weeks, but I think for this week, especially against the Titans, he's definitely worth a play. He's worth a guy looking at because the fact of the matter is the ball's got to go to somebody. And what is predominantly heavier workload in the red zone, it's absolutely worth a shot to take a chance on a Trey Burton this week.
Well, so Trey Burton's sitting at 34.5 when it comes to receiving yards. It's the over-under. Are you taking a shot on that? 34.
Yeah, we got Thrive has him at 24.5 receiving yards.
Oh, maybe it's just a different contest. Okay, that makes sense. What are you going with? Over under on 24.5 or 24?
You know what? I'll give him the over this week. I'll give Trey Burton the over. I'm going to say he's going to get about 7 or 8 targets. They're going to find a mismatch with the Titans linebackers. They're going to look to exploit it. Rivers likes his tight ends. He likes his receivers. I will give him the over. I think he could get himself about 5 catches for 35 yards and maybe sneak a teeter in there in the red zone.
I'll take that, man. I really like Burton moving forward. Like I said, he's going to be a massive play for me, especially at his pricing. I'm going to have him in quite a few of my lineups. Now, let's go to the running game for this, because this running game, we talked about the wide receivers being a clusterfuck. This running game is an absolute clusterfuck. Like, I'm trying to sort through it, trying to sift through it. And honestly, it's not something that we can just see and be like, oh, yeah, that's definitely going to be the play that I want to go with. I mean, we sat there and we looked at the different situations going on with Wilkins coming in. Obviously, we have Jonathan Taylor, who fumbled this past week, lost all the rest of his snaps. I think he was out-snapped by Wilkins 19-11 after he fumbled. Prior to that, he had an ankle injury, which, by the way, the coaching staff did not know about this ankle injury. Either way, he still wasn't efficient. I think he had like 11 carries for 22 yards, or maybe that was last week. Either way, it's something as to where like I get nauseous just trying to, sort through this shit show of a running back committee. But then I came across the pricing, right? And the pricing is where, it really started to get me, because of the fact that I know that the chalk is actually probably going to be heavier on Hines and on Wilkins, which makes Taylor, by the way, at 88 on DraftKings, almost like a contrarian play. It's something as to where, like, Taylor's efficiency has gone down, but at the same time, like, he's more of a volume type running back. When he gets going and he gets those yards and he gets those attempts, he gets the yards and they start to churn out. And we've seen issues, right, where Derrick Henry's a great example, where the Titans just didn't give him enough runs. And all of a sudden, towards the tail end of the season, for the past 2 seasons in a row, they start to give him the ball 25 times. And all of a sudden, he starts churning out more and more yards because he wears the defense down. This is the type of running back that Taylor is. Jonathan Taylor could actually have a breakout game this week. The Titans have given up the 12th most amount of breakaway runs. It's something as to where, like, they've been winning in most of their games so far this season. So they haven't seen a ton of runs against them. Meanwhile, they're allowing 4.5 yards per carry and over 7 yards per reception to the running back position. Not to mention the fact they've given up 11 touchdowns in 8 games to the running back position as a whole. Check this out. In 3 of those games, right, where we talked about, they've given up 4.5 yards per carry and 7 yards per reception, they faced the Bears, the Bills, and the Texans, all who have terrible run games, and then the Bengals, who had Giovanni Bernard in there, not Joe Mixon. I mean, this is something as to where, like, this could be lining up for Taylor. And Taylor at 88, right? He's one of the most expensive players on the slate. People are going to be scared of him, man. People are going to be scared to play him. This is what I'm recommending, okay? You can play all 3 in different lineups, because you can't get away from Wilkins after the past 2 weeks. You can't get away from Hines after his 2 touchdown performance and his ability to catch balls out of the backfield. You can't get away from them. But play them in like 25% each, and then play Taylor in like 40 to 50% of your lineups, because I can guarantee you half of this fantasy world wants to see Jonathan Taylor go up in flames, right? Because they're CEH fans. There's another 25% they're going to be scared off him because of his pricing. Then you have probably a good 15% they're going to be sitting there and they're not able to fit him in the lineups, once again, because of the pricing. They want to play him. They just aren't able to because they can't fit him in there because they like other plays. I think that Taylor's ownership is going to be right around 10% this upcoming week. We have to see what happens, but I'm assuming that Taylor has extremely low ownership. I'd even play him in the bonus slot, to be honest with you. Is there an over-under that you like for prop bet for Wilkins, for Hines, for Jonathan Taylor, for any of these guys?
You know what, man? Honestly, listening to you, I wasn't going to touch it. The only thing with Taylor is the injury. The injury is the only thing holding it back. If the ankle is good to go, which I haven't heard anything, I don't know if you have. Wilkins and Hines, I'm staying away from because this backfield, like you said, it's a clusterfuck. This entire thing is crazy. But looking at it now, I'm gonna go with Jonathan Taylor's over. They don't have one of these combined rushing and receiving yards of 53.5. I'll take the over because the Titans defense, we just said it, 12th against all running backs. You know what? They've allowed a couple big games to running backs like the Dalvin Cooks where he went for $180. But over the last few weeks, for the most part, it's steadily in like the 60-yard give or take range. While that's not a big deal for this purpose, I think we can expect probably 50 rushing yards from Jonathan Taylor. Like that's not a crazy amount. I can see him getting close to 18 touches, maybe going like 13 for 51, maybe sneak a teeter, and then getting 2 or 3 catches, adding about 10 yards, which would hit the over. I think just off volume, Jonathan Taylor should see that. The Titans defense is nothing to worry about. For whatever reason, they have great players, but they're just not a team that can get off the field. They might not be allowing a ton of big plays, but they're just getting nickel and dime to death down the field. The third downs have been the worst for them. So I would probably say, yeah, Jonathan Taylor's worth a slot this week. I think the over could be a good play just off volume, caveat being that the ankle is good to go. I'm not going to say.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything about the ankle at all. Like he's not on the injury report.
Exactly. I think Taylor's a solid play this week. He might be able to give you 15 if you DFS him.
Yeah, and by the way, he's not a cash play. He's tournament only, strictly tournament. All right, now, as for the other guy on this offense that we have not talked about that's going to be a fantasy option, it's going to be Rivers, right? And Rivers has been up against subpar defenses the 2 games prior to Baltimore. He crushed it, man. 633 yards, 6 touchdowns, only 1 interception. Meanwhile, the Titans are 25th up against the quarterback so far this season. They've only faced 2 top 12 quarterbacks. How are they 25th while only facing 2 top 12 quarterbacks? That blows my mind. Like I mentioned earlier, they did revamp their secondary, so that makes things a little bit interesting, but I'm still playing Rivers in a shootout type scenario lineup. Like I'm not going to be playing him everywhere. I'm not going to be playing him in my low scoring lineups where I'm going to be playing both running back type things. But in the shootout type scenarios, I think that Phillip Rivers could have like a 2 or 3 touchdown game. Do you see a prop bet for Phillip Rivers that you like? Nice.
But the only prop bet that they got right now is the 262.5 passing yards. To me, that might be a little bit high, but the thing is, I don't like it because he can hit that. It's just honestly, it's very game script dependent. I'm not.
So you're staying away from all Phillip Rivers over-unders.
Phillip Rivers this week for his prop bets in terms of, I would stay away from him. Fantasy, he's not a bad start. I mean, there's definitely guys better that I would go after, but Rivers is a guy at any given Sunday or Thursday is capable of giving you 2 or 3 touchdowns. He might give you 22, a solid day. It really comes down to the pass catchers. That's the biggest thing. They're all a question mark. That's why I'm very hesitant on Rivers. If they have one receiver that was really cooking this year, if Hilton was doing anything close to what we expected, then I'd be like, you know what? Let's trot him out there. Let's give him the over.
So you're going to take a chance on him in some DFS lineups.
Yeah, but for DFS purposes, he's definitely worth a shot. For prop bets, I'd probably stay away from him altogether. There is one.
Yeah, he's sitting there at the 4th most expensive player. I mean, A.J. Brown and Derrick Henry are both more expensive than Phillip Rivers. So it's something as to where, like, I'm taking a shot on Rivers. He's less than 10K. So all you need is 20 points, which essentially is, 2 touchdowns, 250 yards type thing, with some extra bonus plays in there, 300 yards maybe. All right, now on to.
Wait, we're missing one. You're missing Rodrigo Blankenship. We're not going to talk about
Oh God, I don't bring up kickers, man. Like I'll bring up kickers from time to time if the matchup is really, really bad. But kickers for me, like, hey, he okay. Let's do it. Let's go ahead and cover it. Let's do it.
He's got the total points is 6.5, which, if I'm not mistaken, just means if he got 2 field goals and a point after, that would hit. I like the over on him. I think Blankenship's has been one of the best kickers in the NFL this year. I think 2 field goals is very attainable, and I'm gonna just go out on a limb and say that the Colts score 1 touchdown and gets the point after. I think 7 for Rodrigo Blankenship is a smash this week. I don't know if the Colts are going to be able to close every possession out in the red zone with a touchdown, I should say. So I think 2 field goals is very doable for him. I'm actually starting him in one of my lineups this week.
He's averaging 9.5 points per game, and on DraftKings, he's only 4K. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to the other side of things, right, with the Titans. And we'll start it out with probably the focal point of the Titans offense, Derrick Henry. And rightfully so. The dude's been a beast. And although his efficiency so far this year has actually come down compared to last year, he's on pace to smash his carry count this year. His carries. So it's something as to where, like, yeah, we expected his efficiency to drop, but that gives him more opportunities to run, to get those, first downs, etc. So, that doesn't always result in fantasy points for a running back, obviously. In fact, that's probably worse because he wears down and has more chances for injury. Either way, though, he's still on pace to put up almost the exact same stats he put up last year. Now, the issue becomes the Colts defense up against the run. Derrick Henry struggled up against the Bears, who were ranked 12th against the running back. Then he struggled up against the Steelers, who was first up against the running back. And in comparison to his price tag on DraftKings, right, it's something as to where that makes me nervous to actually go on and play him. I mean, he's the second most expensive player. And ever since Lewin's been out, with that torn ACL, they haven't been very efficient overall running the ball. And even the volume's been hurting to an extent. Meanwhile, the team hasn't really gotten better. So sitting there and looking at it, right, and looking at the teams that the Colts have faced so far this year, they faced J.K. Dobbins. They faced Joe Mixon. They faced Kareem Hunt. They faced Dalvin Cook. They faced James Robinson. Only Hunt out of those guys, right, were worth a start in DFS, who actually paid back their price tag. They held the entire Lions rushing attack, by the way, to 8 yards on the ground. The entire game, they got 8 yards on the ground. And the Lions have actually been pretty good about running the ball so far this year. At 10,800, you're looking at 2,100 or 21.6 fantasy points this week from Derrick Henry. And I don't see that happening. I'm thinking that he finishes with sub 100 yards. Buckner's turned this Colts front seven into a monster. They're complete polar opposite of what they were last year. And don't get me wrong, I'm still going to have Henry in one of my lineups because I'm going to hate myself if I don't throw him at least one. But yeah, how are you feeling about Henry on the prop bets?
You know what? It's funny you say that because I was looking at how the Colts defense was doing earlier. And yeah, they're allowing the 3rd fewest points to running backs. They've been the real deal against the run. Derrick Henry, obviously, they don't use him as a pass catcher. He's very much a downhill runner, one cut, get up the field type of guy. And if I'm not mistaken, Kareem Hunt, as a single rusher, has got the highest number against that defense this year with 72 yards. 20 carries, 72 yards. So they've been very good. I love Derrick Henry. He is one of my favorite players. I call him Hercules, a big incubator guy for me. Had him since his conception. The problem is, though, you mentioned it. Taylor Lewan's out. It's been hurting them. He's got a tough next few weeks. And, for fantasy purposes, once the playoffs come around, he's going to be good to go. He's going to get the green light. I hate myself for it because he can break it at any time. Unfortunately, and I don't do this often, I got to go with the under for Derrick Henry tonight. 79 or tomorrow night, 79.5 rushing yards. I hope I'm wrong because I have him in a couple lineups. I hope he gets it. I hope he blows up. But 79.5 yards, man, they haven't allowed that to a single rusher all year. Like I said, Kareem Hunt at 72 is the highest. I would definitely DFS him. You got it. You hate yourself if you don't. He's still capable of scoring 2 touchdowns. But honestly, if I was putting the prop bet on it, it'd be an under. And I hate to say it. I hate to do it.
It is what it is, though. You gotta make the tough decisions.
You got it. And right now, I would go with the under in yards. And I don't want to, but it just – Henry's one of those guys that could be the exception, that could prove to be the one player that, bucks the trend against a ferocious Colts run defense. But
like Dalvin Cook does, but couldn't up against this team.
Yep. But if we're going with the probabilities, we got to go Henry on the under at 79.5 yards.
All right. Let's run it with the wide receivers now. I told y'all Davis would struggle last week. Told you guys. I mean, Fuller's no joke over there, and Fuller locked him down. He had 0 receptions last week. As for the wide receivers, the Colts defenses have faced, they have not been good so far this year, which is a big reason as to why Xavier Howard has looked so good. Like, he's looked amazing because he hasn't faced anybody. I mean, I called him shutting down Galladay, and then even Galladay got hurt up against the Colts. So they haven't faced anybody really when it comes to the wide receivers. Meanwhile, right, we had A.J. Brown, just show out once again, showing why he is such a dominant wide receiver and probably one of the top dynasty prospects moving forward. But we're not going to talk about that because this is DFS. Now, with that being said, right, I think it could happen again this week, especially if he gets left in single coverage on Howard. On the other side of things, we have Rock Ya-Sin, who should be matched up with Corey Davis, and Rock Ya-Sin has not been good so far this year, so they'll probably end up putting a safety over top of Rock Ya-Sin to make sure that Corey Davis doesn't beat him for the 15 to 20-yard catches like he's been doing so far this season. So if that doesn't happen on every single play, I still think that Corey Davis could get back to his 100 yards or a touchdown type games like he's had so far this year. But A.J. Brown, right, is ranked the 4th best wide receiver by Pro Football Focus. Davis is ranked as the 10th. The Colts have not faced anything even close to that so far this year. I'm starting both guys. And that's going to be my base to a lot of my DFS lineups. Now, I'm not saying that either one of them actually have to be the captain in that spot. In fact, I'll probably do the opposite because I think they could spread the ball around to an extent. You could even include Johnny Smith in there if you'd like to. I probably wouldn't go that far to throw, all 4 pass catchers on the same team in there, but you could do it. Meanwhile, you're sitting there and you play, you run it back with like a Michael Pittman type guy in the captain spot because he could end up getting all the catches. When it comes to Humphreys, he's most likely going to be out this game, which means that Raymond is going to be in, and he's going to take over that slot role. He's a big play type receivers, and the Colts are really good about keeping these big play type receivers from getting big plays. So Raymond, I don't think he's going to be an option this week. How are you feeling? Right? How are you feeling about this Tennessee Titans wide receiver corps this week, especially since you picked the under for Derrick Henry?
Yeah, you know what? Well, those things pretty much coincide because Derrick Henry faces more loaded boxes than anybody. Even if he got a 7-man box, it'd be pretty generous. But he gets to 8, sometimes 9-man boxes because he is such a threat at any play. That translates. A lot of times, the guys like A.J., the guys like Corey Davis are going to get those single coverages. And guess what? A.J. Brown, yet again, last week in double coverage, proved one thing. He's a grown-ass man. Double coverage doesn't mean shit for a guy like A.J. Brown. He's an absolute freak. And the fact of the matter is the Bears' defense is pretty good. The Colts' defense is pretty good. Xavier Rhodes is enjoying a nice little renaissance season. But let's call it what it is. Looking at who the Colts have played at receiver, when they've played decent receivers, they've allowed some pretty big games. T. Higgins went for $125, and he's a rookie. So the fact of the matter is, I think we got to roll with A.J. Brown. He's a no-brainer for me. He doesn't get as much volume as we would hope for, but he's very efficient. He's a great yards after the catch runner, and he's a guy that can take it to the house on any given play. His number this week is 63.5 total yards. Receiving yards, to me, that's a no-brainer. I'm taking the over. Listen, he has some volatility to him because of the offense that he plays in, because they're dedicated to giving Derrick Henry 20-plus carries, 25, sometimes 30, which I do love. And that could also mean only like 5 or 6 targets for Brown. But you got to take the over on that because he can break one at any given time. And they have yet to face a receiver that's a playmaker like A.J. Brown, the Colts defense. They haven't faced too many of them. So he's an absolute over. Corey Davis, they don't have the prop bet on here listed, but For me, he's a guy I would definitely slot in. He's going to have a bounce back week because, like you said, Kyle Fuller locked him down. He's no joke of a corner. He's been no joke of a corner for a very long time in this league. Davis is a guy that's probably going to be looking, if they decide to double A.J. Brown and load the box, he's going to be the guy that's getting the one-on-ones against a guy like Rocky Sin. I'll take my chances with Corey Davis as well. So I think both of those guys are absolute starts.
All right, let's go to the final pass-catching position, the final position period, and that's the tight end position because the Colts have actually been really solid up against the tight ends so far this year. I mean, even up against the good ones. Hawkinson has been the best so far, and he had 7 receptions for 65 yards, which is good, but not great. They haven't allowed a single tight end to get a touchdown up against them. Now, when it comes to the Titans, we never know what they're going to do at tight end, man. They could always, bend you over one week, and then you could be celebrating the next with them. Jonnu's been overly efficient in the first few weeks, and then Taylor Lewin got hurt, and all of a sudden, Jonnu's being asked to block a little bit more often. So I still do like Jonnu as, as an extent, especially if I'm not playing Corey Davis or A.J. Brown or either one of those guys. I'll definitely have Jonnu in my lineup if I'm not playing either one because somebody's got to catch some passes over there. But Jonnu's not going to be in a ton of my lineups. I'll probably say 30%. Meanwhile, I'll have Fursker in at about 10% of my lineups. This isn't the week where I'm going to try and get too cute with it, to be honest. How are you feeling with these tight ends? Is there an over-under on these tight ends?
You hit the nail on the head. Jonnu Smith is a great weapon to have, but in this offense, especially like a lot of these pass catchers, he's volatile. And the Colts are allowing the second fewest points to tight ends in fantasy this year. His number is 29.5, and he's been doing solid the last few weeks, but in the development that he's going up against a defense like this, I would probably fade him. He's probably going to be seeing a lot of Darius Leonard, who's one of the best linebackers in football. To me, Jonnu Smith might be a fade this week.
Yeah, I'm going to be fading him slightly when it comes to the DFS lineups, of course, because of the fact that he is so expensive. I mean, he's $7K. That's going to be what, 6th or 7th most expensive, 7th most expensive so far on the slate. He is 800 less than Corey Davis, which makes that kind of interesting. But yeah, the Colts have just been really good, and they've played some pretty good overall tight ends. Now, when it comes to getting cute, wait, do you want to talk about any kickers? Do you want to talk about, who is it, Gostkowski?
Nah, man, he misses too many field goals. He's against Minnesota, man. He's too shady.
Hey, he only has a point less than Rodrigo Blankenship so far in the year when it comes to points per game.
How's that efficiency?
Oh, it doesn't matter to me. We're playing DFS, baby.
Yeah,
it's all about the tournament upside.
Yeah, but he's not maximizing all those opportunities. I mean, he had that monster game against Minnesota where he had like 30 piece, which is like ridiculous. But he's missed those. I don't know. Are you losing? Do they count kickers losing points if you miss in DFS?
I don't believe so. But like I said, I don't really talk about the kickers too much just because, I mean, if I see a great value, like both these guys are actually really solid values overall. But yeah, it's something as to where like, dude, if they have these big games, you kind of want them in these big games. So he only had he had 2 games where he missed, but he missed 2 games in Houston and 1 field goal in Pittsburgh, 1 in Cincinnati. Oh, and then the first game, Denver. Yeah, so he's kind of all over the place. But that 6 for 6 game, man, that 25 points, that will win you. That could actually win you.
It could. That Pittsburgh, that was heart-wrenching, that Pittsburgh one. That 45-yarder to send it to OT after the Titans had a ferocious comeback. I can't let that one go.
All right, so let's talk about some of these dart throws real quick. We already brought up, Fursker and seeing where that goes with it. Fursker is once again a dart throw. When it comes to Michael Harris, is another guy at 1,800, where, hell, he came out last week and put up 9.5 fantasy points on 4 and 4 targets. But you guys got to keep in mind that Hilton was out last week, and Baltimore probably was not exactly prepared for him. So I'm not going to be playing this week. He's a fade for me as well. Cleve Raymond is probably the most interesting one at 1K. We brought him up earlier. But like we said, man, the Indianapolis Colts don't allow big plays to any position in the air. So you'd have to really be playing, some dart throw type material there. Not huge on that. Meanwhile, we have Devonta Foreman, Jeremy McNichols, those 2 guys over there in the backfield. Ken Blasinghame's another guy. they're not going to get high value targets. You'd be lucky as hell to see them in the end zone. I mean, I think combined they get like 3 or 4 rushing attempts a game behind Derrick Henry. Is there any other dart throw that you see on here that you wanted to talk about?
I mean, the only two that I really have are Ferkser, because I think Cole Pruitt's out this week, and as good as Jonnu Smith is, Ferkser's had a couple big games in his absence. I mean, if the Titans decide, you never know, on a couple formations, they're run heavy. They show a lot of run. They're big on the play action. So maybe they show 2 tight ends, and they have Ferkser on one side, and they have Jonnu Smith on the other, and they run a play action, and Ferkser busts one loose for like a 35-yard gain. You never know. And a lot of times they line up heavy in the goal line, and he might be a guy that sneaks a touchdown, so he's not a bad dart throw. Then I would say the other one is Nyheim Hines, because just of how Rivers loves to check the ball down. He had that one huge game a couple weeks ago. I think it was against Detroit. Hard to really count on that, but his ceiling is very high. Floor is dangerously low, but that's why he's a dart throw. So Nyheim Hines is a guy I'm definitely looking at as well, purely as a dart throw.
Well, keep in mind, guys, Hines is at 6,200, so that's actually more expensive than like the T.Y. Hiltons, the Trey Burtons, the almost expensive as Zach Pascal. So when it comes to dart throws and stuff, we're looking at like cheaper guys who could make the back end if you go top heavy on your lineups. For Hines, like I talked about, like I'm going to be playing him in a few lineups right along there with Wilkins, probably about equal amount of lineups. But for me, the big one is going to be Jonathan Taylor, just because of his pricing over there for the Indianapolis running game. Now, with Fersker, I just wanted to bring up this point, and then we're actually going to hop out of here, guys. Fersker only has 1 pass block in all the snaps he's played. Jonnu Smith is averaging like 5 or 6 pass blocks a game, especially since Luan's been out. So to see Fersker, right, going out on every single time it's a pass outside of once, that's impressive. Like that's something where that could make that dart throw very, very interesting. I might actually stick him in a little bit more lineups than what I planned on doing. Now, with that being said, John, you want to get out of here and let everybody know where they can find you?
Absolutely. Vinny Chase, always a pleasure. So anyway, you can find me on Twitter at _JohnnyVTV, Instagram JohnnyVTV, every Tuesday night, 7:30. Fantasy Egos, myself, Kevin Fitzmaurice, Tyrell Stewart, and the rest of the JDF crew, as well as Sundays on the Fitz Lounge, 10 to 12. You can find me putting out my gambling picks as well as my favorite daily fantasy lineups for the week.
Love it, man. Absolutely love it. You guys can check out our content at linktr.ee/fantasy intervention. Once again, that's linktr.ee/fantasy intervention. That's where you can find all of our content. We do have a website coming, guys, so get excited for that. You guys can also find all of our stuff for fantasy intervention on Twitter at @joinourcircle_. And of course, you guys can find me at FF_intervention. FF_intervention. Hey, listen, thank you guys for coming out and checking out our DFS episode. Hope you guys win a ton of money. And thank you guys for letting us intervene with your fantasy football life. We're out.